together, and we learn together, we work together, and we prosper together.
Hello, and welcome to our global audience. My name is Dorothy Mora, and I'm an academic exchange specialist with the Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. We have a wonderful program for you today, and we'll discuss various aspects of the application process. We're fortunate to be joined by someone who has guided thousands of international students in filling out their applications. With us today is Michael Nixon, Acting Director of Admissions at Catholic University here in Washington, D.C. EducationUSA is a U.S. Department of State network of more than 400 advising centers in 170 countries that promotes higher education in the United States. Today, our EducationUSA Center in New Delhi, India, is joining us virtually. Hi, New Delhi. We look forward to answering your questions over the next hour. For our online audience, we have a chat space on this webpage. Please log into the chat and ask any questions. You can also join the conversation on Twitter via the hashtag StudyInTheUSA. There are aspects of the application process that can be confusing at first, so let's start by simplifying it for you. Let's first go to the students gathered in New Delhi. Good evening, New Delhi. Please go ahead with the first question.
I'm a high school student and I'm pursuing pre-medical undergraduate program in the United States. Are there any specific requirements I need to demonstrate to make my application competitive?
Okay, Michael, the question was, if I'm hearing correctly, how can you make a medical application effective for study in the United States?
It's a great question and one we get all the time. I think what's really important to understand about a pre-medicine program is that at a lot of universities, it's something that's in addition to your academic major, whether that's biology or chemistry. So if you're looking to go into majors like that, it's always really important to have strong grades in biology and chemistry in high school. If you have courses that are offered such as anatomy or physiology or something like that, as someone reading the application, demonstrating to me that you're interested in the medical field and taking steps right now that you're able to get as much learning done as you can in high school. But I think just really demonstrating an interest, because I think especially for pre-medical programs, the advisors really like to work with students who are dedicated. And from my experience talking to their pre-med advisors at Catholic, it's those students who work hard from their freshman year are the ones who tend to be most successful. So I think really just taking the courses that you can in high school and understanding that the pre-med program is usually not a major at a university, but it is something that you often get separate advising for.
Thanks, Mike. Great answer. Let's go to another question from New Delhi.
Hi, I am a visually challenged student and I am studying in a mainstream high school in India. I would like to pursue my education from United States of America. So I would like to know what is liberal arts and how I can get benefit by applying liberal arts colleges.
Okay, the question was, how can you apply to liberal arts colleges in the United States?
Yeah. Liberal arts is a term that's used a lot when describing many colleges and universities in the U.S., including Catholic University. And what that means is there's often, you can call it sort of a core curriculum. So all students of all majors are be taking courses in things like philosophy, math, and science, humanities, to really provide a well-rounded education. I always tell students that when you're graduating from liberal arts school, you'll be able to think critically and really write well, regardless of your major, whether that's physics, musical theater, or history. When you're applying to them, it's really the same application process as other universities. A lot of times liberal arts colleges and universities will do more of a holistic approach. So they'll look at your test scores and your grades, but they'll also look a lot more at what you'll be able to bring to the campus community. So that's things like your essay, your letters of recommendation, any extracurricular activities you're involved with. So they're really looking much more at the whole student as opposed to simply academic credentials.
Thanks for the great questions, New Delhi. Michael, you're from Catholic University. One question I had, and many students might have, is do you have to be Catholic to apply to Catholic University?
Sure. Absolutely not. So we have students from over 90 different countries and all around the U.S. as well at Catholic. We have students from all different religions. And I will say that when reviewing applications, whether it's Catholic or many universities, religion is really not a factor. We always say we welcome students from all faiths, and I think everyone feels very comfortable when coming to Catholic and applying to CUA.
Thanks very much for that. Another question we get is, are all university applications the same or are they different?
Sure. Most of them are different. So many universities will have their own supplement to applications or their own application. There is things like the common application where a lot of universities will be members, so you can fill out one common application with common elements such as the same essay questions or school information, biographical information, and send it to multiple schools at once. And then some schools might have extra writing supplements or something like that that's specific to their school. The greatest resource is always the school's website. Most of the time they will have a separate section for international students. And so that gives you not only what a domestic student would need, but also a few extra steps and some extra credentials or paperwork that you need to hand in as well.
Thank you, Mike. Another question we've been receiving from students is, when are the application deadlines? And do you recommend applying early?
Yeah, so my number one piece of advice to all students is to always start the application process as early as possible. At Catholic, we have two deadlines, one early action, which is in November, and one is regular decision, which is coming up in February on the 15th. So that's pretty standard for a lot of schools. They'll have an early deadline and a regular deadline, usually one in the fall and then one in the winter or early spring for some schools. Especially as international students, sometimes it takes a little longer for credentials to reach a school, if you need to get an evaluation done, or for the visa process as well. So I always recommend doing it even earlier than the deadlines. So if it's November 15th, I encourage international students to try and have everything done by October 15th, just to allow you time so you're not as stressed, more stressed than you need to be, to give you some time to take in all the information and make the right decision ultimately.
Thanks, Mike. That's great advice. So it's important to check the international page of the college or university website, because each one might be different. Yep. Okay, let's get to some more of the great online questions that are coming in. One online viewer asks, is it true that most U.S. schools require a payment just to apply? And we do not get that money back even if we're not accepted into the school. So can you talk about application fees?
Sure. Yeah, for the most part, most schools will require an application fee. They range in cost. I know that at Catholic it's about $55, and you usually are not able to get it back. So you pay the fee as part of your application, and that's just part of the standard application process in the U.S. The next step is usually a deposit. So that's a separate payment once you're admitted to the university, which is a little bit different, and that's kind of confirming your attendance. But most schools do require an application fee to apply.
And that application fee, it usually is not refunded.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. An online viewer says, I'm a first-year student in Lithuania at a state-funded institution. Are there possibilities to transfer my studies to a college or university in the USA and continue the next year as a second-year student?
Yeah.
So we're talking about transfer applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I know at Catholic we accept international transfer applications, and I know many schools across the U.S. do as well. Important part of that is most likely you'll have to get your current transcripts and grades evaluated by a third party to turn them into a U.S. equivalency. So that will help the school, whoever's evaluating those credits, look at them easier and kind of evaluate them to what is offered by their own university. And then the other piece is the syllabus that corresponds to those courses as well, to help them decide that. But yeah, absolutely, it's a possibility.
Thank you. Another online viewer says, I'm an excellent student in Guadalajara, Mexico, studying political science. I don't have enough financial resources, just good English and a tourist visa. What should I do to come to study in the U.S.?
So you have a lot of different options. Certainly, universities and colleges don't expect everyone to come visit campus and interview, because we know that's not an option for everyone. If you're a strong student in English as well, I think that just demonstrating to colleges your credentials and your academic rigor is important. Financial aid in terms of scholarships for international students really varies from school to school. So that's where it's important to really do your research on which schools offer what and what is available to international students as well. But I do know that a number of schools do offer international student scholarships. And in terms of the visa, I always recommend students to go ahead and apply first. At Catholic, we don't take your visa status into account when you apply. So that's usually an F1 visa is something that you would work with the university about after an admissions decision is made.
Thanks, Mike. And also the EducationUSA centers often have lists of scholarships and other financial aid opportunities. So please do check with the EducationUSA center in your country for the latest information. We really appreciate all the great questions. Please keep sending them in using the chat space or on Twitter using the hashtag #StudyInTheUSA. Another viewer asks, how many letters of recommendation do I need, and who should the letters come from?
Sure. So that, again, varies from university to university. Most of them will require at least one. We require at least one at Catholic. And for the most part, they're going to come from your teachers. But if you want to have it come from maybe a volunteer supervisor or someone who you work with, for me, it's always a chance to get to know you a little bit outside of the classroom too. So someone who you think can speak to you in that regard and really knows you well and can talk about how you'll be able to contribute in the campus community as well as your performance in the classroom.
Thank you. That's great advice. Another question coming in from our audience, how do standardized tests factor into admissions decisions, such as the TOEFL test, IELTS, SAT, ACT? How do you evaluate those as part of the whole admissions application?
For Catholic University, they are required. Some universities are test optional, but a lot of times for international students, you have to demonstrate some sort of English proficiency, which is often done through a standardized test. So the TOEFL, IELTS, ACT, or ACT can satisfy that in terms of demonstrating that English proficiency. And a lot of times those are also used in scholarship determination as well. So as an international student, I would absolutely recommend taking one of those tests, because for most universities and colleges, you'll have to submit scores for them.
Great advice. Thank you. We have another great question. Do most schools have a special admissions office for international students?
Yeah, I think so. If not an office, certainly a dedicated staff for that. I think it depends on the size of the school. Oftentimes, larger universities will have dedicated international admissions office. I know at Catholic University, we just have dedicated staff within the undergraduate admissions office, but certainly there will be someone who works with international students. And oftentimes, you can find their contact information on that website, and it's always a great idea to contact them directly as well.
Yes, very important for any question. Don't consider any question not worthy of being asked.
Yes, we would rather hear from you than not, for sure.
Another viewer writes, I plan on applying for this coming fall session, and I'm about to do my TOEFL in 3 weeks. Is it okay to start the application process with TOEFL scores and then send in GMAT scores at a later date?
I know at Catholic, yes, that would be okay. We usually ask that the initial application be in by the deadline, and it's okay if some of the credentials arrive afterwards. And I can't speak to other universities. That would be a great question for that international student office admissions person. But for us, I know as long as the initial application is in by a deadline, you're okay.
Yeah, so the important thing to remember is each university and college is different, so look for that International Student Service Office page and the contact information. Great advice.
Thanks.
I've heard that there are some PhD programs where you're not required to have a master's degree. Is that true? And what are some of the available majors?
Yeah. Again, that's going to be really program specific. Where graduate school often differs from undergraduate admissions is that you work much more closely with the academic discipline in a school. So a lot of times it's going to vary by the discipline, sometimes by the professor who you'll be working with. So if you're applying to PhD programs, I would recommend getting in contact with the academic department of that university, because oftentimes they'll actually be the ones reviewing your application.
Thank you. Great advice. We have a question from a viewer in Spain. Is it possible to study through an online program?
Yeah, I think so. I think lots of universities are shifting or creating online programs, so they're becoming more and more popular. Sometimes some of the more traditional majors and programs aren't yet available online, but it's certainly an option.
Great. Another viewer asks, what if we miss the application deadline? What should we do about something like that?
Yeah. So again, school specific, but always ask. Never ever hurts. Give them a call or an email, ask if it's okay. I know someone called me, explain your situation. I would always recommend asking, don't just give up right away. Sure.
Yeah, check the college or university website, and then there are some schools that have rolling admissions.
Yeah, and so
what does rolling admissions mean?
Yeah, so rolling admissions is that there is no hard deadline. They'll review applications and send out decisions as they receive them. So that's important to know as well. Yeah.
We have another question. How much does GPA or grade point average matter for getting into a master's program?
I think GPA is probably one of the most important factors for any program, especially for graduate school. They want to see that you're able to do college-level coursework in the discipline that you're applying to. So I would say it's pretty important.
Another question, do my application materials need to be translated? And also, do I need to get them notarized?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, all universities ask that they be translated. You'll have to send in official copies, so directly from your high school or college or wherever you're studying. At Catholic, we ask that they be evaluated as well, so have the U.S. equivalency done before you send them to us. Some universities will do that in-house in their own university, but I think it's always safe to assume that it would definitely need to be translated for sure. And
do you have a list of credential evaluators at your university? And many universities would have recommendations for you.
Yeah, I know in our international student requirement page, we list the credential evaluators that we work with and accept, and other universities will list them as well.
Another viewer asks, how much do extracurricular activities factor into the application process?
Yeah, I think especially at Catholic, and I'm sure at other universities, we're looking to bring in students who are not only academically qualified, but who we're really confident are going to contribute to our campus community, and that's through those extracurricular activities that we're able to kind of garner that. So we want to bring in students who are involved, who have taken on leadership roles, who we know who are going to come to the campus and be successful. So I think extracurricular activities are really important, especially when you're looking at liberal arts schools as well.
And as far as defining extracurricular activities, what are some of the extracurricular activities that your students have put on their applications?
Yeah, sure. So it can be school clubs, whether that's academic, cultural, special interest, sports. A job is considered an extracurricular activity, showing that you have that responsibility, time management skills, volunteer experiences. If you've taken like any trips, mission trips or something like that abroad, I think you can really, there's a very broad scope that falls under extracurricular activities.
Wonderful. Let's go back to New Delhi for a few more questions. New Delhi, do you have some questions for Michael?
Yes, I'm a working professional and I'm applying for a MS program in the US. I wanted to know what is the role of application essays in a graduate application, like what specific information are the universities looking for?
I didn't hear the first part of your question, but I think you're applying for an MS program and asking about what application materials the university is looking for. What field was it that you were interested in?
I'm into IT, information
IT.
technology. I
Oh.
wanted to ask about
Okay, excellent field.
I wanted
Michael.
to ask about the application essays.
Okay, so we have a question about application procedures in the IT field at the master's level.
Yep. I think that most graduate programs will have their own applications for those programs. If you're wondering about things like the essay, they'll have specific prompts for you to answer. So maybe they'll ask questions about why you're interested in their program specifically, or kind of how you see your work that you've already done applying to the research or the work that they're doing at their college university. But again, the application materials are going to vary from school to school. So especially for graduate programs, like I said, it's always a great idea to contact those academic departments as well.
Wonderful. And again, the Education USA Center can have a lot of great information for you about specific schools and programs. Okay, back to New Delhi for 3 more questions.
Ma'am, I'm pursuing my undergraduate degree here in India, and actually the grades that are used in the grading system used in my university is very different from the ones that are considered in the US. So do I need to convert my grade points into a 4-point scale? And will the US universities do it on their own, or do I need to use a credential service?
Okay, we've got 2 questions here. One is, should a student provide an evaluation of their grades comparing it to the US grading system? And the other one had to do with credential evaluators.
Yes.
So let's deal with the first question about how to interpret grades from India or another country and converting it into a US equivalent.
Sure. I think that they're within the same process. When you're applying to a U.S. college or university, they're going to want to know the U.S. equivalency of the grades. So whether that's through something that they do at their own university, it really depends on their staff and the staff that they have there, if they have someone who's able to do that. It's always great, and at Catholic we ask students to have those credentials evaluated before you send them to us, so equivalency is already done. If you're working with your school in India, sometimes they have their own sort of a key or a guide that will equate them as well. But I think that for the most part, you're at least going to want to get some sort of equivalency for U.S. grades when you're applying.
And it's good to provide some context. For instance, if no one ever gets the top grades, for instance, in your country, to provide a little bit of an explanation about how a very good student might be getting a B or a C in the United States when actually that's an extremely good score for the university or high school they're coming from.
Yeah, and I think that's also a great spot for your letters of recommendation too, to talk about that and give whoever's reviewing the application that context as well.
And as far as the credential evaluators, you mentioned previously that you have a list of credential evaluators you work with, and that most universities and colleges should be able to give you names of credential evaluators that they will accept information from. And of course, the Education USA Center in your country also can be of great assistance in helping you identify credential evaluators. Okay, another question from New Delhi.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
My name is Dr. Vaibhav Singh. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So, hello, ma'am. My name is Dr. Vaibhav Singh. I am a medical doctor. I passed out in 2009. Since then, I'm working in Delhi. I'm working with Dr. Bandana Shiva. And I missed my round 2 deadlines because of, certain problem. I mean, I didn't miss all the deadlines, but I didn't apply to as many schools as I wanted to. Now I'm applying in round 3. for MBA. So is there any special tip you would like to give me? Because we have been told that round 2 dynamics are totally different from round 3 dynamics. So is there anything that you would like to suggest? I mean, that's what I'm here for. Thank you.
If I'm understanding correctly, you're a medical doctor and you're applying for an MBA program in the United States, and some of the application deadlines have passed, but there are 3 other schools you're applying for, and you want some advice about, is it about your application or what schools you should apply to?
The MBA, I'll tell you the course of admission in MBA. MBA is generally, they admit candidates in 3 rounds, round 1, round 2, round 3. So I applied to 4-5 main colleges in round 2, but I couldn't apply to all. Now round 3 I would be applying to 4-5 more colleges. So I have another 2 months with me, so I don't think that should be a problem. I have all the materials ready. But what special, I mean, round 3, they say it becomes really competitive. It becomes very, very competitive. So what should I do to stand out? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. So the question is, how can you make your application very competitive for an MBA program?
I think it's going to be in your letters of recommendation and your statement of purpose, especially if your GPA and your grades are already very high and they meet the academic standards that the rest of the applicants are going to be applying to. They're going to look for something different that you can bring to the program. So I would really focus on talking about that in your essay and your letters of recommendation. Send in maybe a resume or something like that with your application as well. So some extra supplemental materials that will add on to your academic record.
Great advice. Thank you very much. We've got more questions that are coming in from our online audience. Let's get to them now. Michael, does a university's ranking play a role in the visa process?
No, not to my knowledge. I think the visa process is done separate of a university's ranking. There are so many different rankings out there for universities. The visa process is really just based on your paperwork, making sure that you have it all in order, and working with the university that you'll be attending to make sure that they do everything on their end as well.
Thank you, Michael. And as Michael said, there are many different rankings. Your program could have a ranking in business or finance. Right. So make sure that you check different types of rankings and, of course, be able to explain why you want to pursue the program of study that you are going to fulfill. Another question is, do you have an ESL program, English as a Second Language program, or a conditional acceptance program for international students if they don't have the necessary tests?
At Catholic University, yes, we do have an intensive English program on our campus, and you can enroll in that program and apply once you're enrolled in that program for a conditional admission to the university. The policy at Catholic University is that you have to be currently enrolled in an English program in the U.S. to apply for the conditional admission to the academic portion of the university. So that's, again, conditional admissions is really different from university to university, but for the most part it is conditional on completing some sort of English proficiency.
So that would mean that you would not need to take the TOEFL test if you were enrolled in an English program?
At Catholic University, yeah, if you enroll in our intensive English program and complete that program, then you do not need to take the TOEFL. Correct.
Okay, good advice. Thank you. Another online viewer asks, do I need to take the LSAT, that's the law school test, for a PhD program in law?
I think my best piece of advice for that is to really research the program that you want to attend and look at the admissions requirements on their website. It's hard for me to say because a lot of universities have different requirements when it comes to LSATs and PhD programs. So again, their website is going to be your best resource for figuring out requirements for each school.
Yeah, and that is another important point. We have over 4,000 universities and colleges in the United States, and each one does things a little bit different. So it's very, very important to check their website and also check with your EducationUSA Center.
Yep.
Another question is, how do I write an effective application essay?
Start early. I think that's really important to make sure you're proofreading, and really think about it. Put a lot of thought into it. I think it's very easy for admissions officer to tell if an essay has been rushed or if a student really hasn't put a lot of thought into it. You don't have to have some great, amazing story or something that you went through, but as long as it's a well thought out, thoughtful essay, and when I'm done reading it, I get a feeling that I know you a little bit better and can kind of picture how you would fit into our campus and contribute to the community. So don't feel like you have to write some extravagant story, but as long as it's thoughtful and clear, that's the most important part.
Great advice. Another question is, okay, we dealt with how do I write an effective application essay. Is a 3 years bachelor's degree in our home country sufficient for getting into a master's program in the United States?
So that's where that credential evaluation is going to really come into play, because at the end of that evaluation, they'll tell us what the U.S. equivalency is. So if the U.S. equivalency is a bachelor's degree, then I think it would suffice for applying to a master's program on the basis of completing your undergraduate study.
Thank you. We have a question from someone in Egypt who's asking via Twitter if there are any scholarship programs that we can learn about through the U.S. embassies.
Yeah, I think EducationUSA is probably a really good resource for that. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how the centers in each country work with students. I do know that a lot of times some embassies in each country will work with students for scholarship programs through that government. But I think EducationUSA is really good at guiding students to work with U.S. Embassy for scholarships.
Absolutely. So thank you for mentioning that. Check with your Education USA Center. We have many scholarship programs in different fields, and they are listed on your embassy website. Carolina from Mexico asks, is it a requirement to be in a graduate program to apply for admission to an English program?
No, I don't think so. In reference to like an ESL program, no. A lot of programs that I'm familiar with, and the one at Catholic, you can apply to them before going into undergraduate study. I think the real aim of those programs is to prepare students for study in the U.S. for both undergraduate and graduate programs.
Thanks. Another question is, should I convert my grades into a GPA on a 4.0 scale, or will your college or university be able to do it for me?
At Catholic University, we ask that you do it from your end through an credential evaluation before you send it to us. Some colleges and universities are able to do it on their end as well. So as long as you send them a translated copy that's in English, they're able, with their research, to convert it. So it depends on the school.
Thank you. Another question is, how do I go about applying for health insurance? And do I need to send my medical records along with application forms? Great question.
Yeah, so I wouldn't send medical records with your initial application. I would just apply to the school and send in the admissions requirements. A lot of times, colleges and universities will offer health insurance through them to students, and it's often actually a requirement for students to have health insurance. So I would research that. If you don't have your own, you can often get it through the college or university. Oftentimes you'll have to send in immunization records or something like that, but that's often much further down the line, usually in the summer before you attend school. So I wouldn't send anything as sensitive as medical records with your application.
Yes, wait for your acceptance.
Yes.
Another question is, I'm from a developing country. Can my application fee be waived?
That's a school-specific for sure. A lot of times if you're taking something like the SAT or ACT, if you get a waiver for that test, oftentimes the school will waive your application fee for you at that point. But that's another great question for you to be in contact with the school about. So if you need an application fee waiver, I would use that contact email for either the International Student Admissions Counselor or the admissions office in general for that question.
Great. So that depends on the school, but it's a good question to ask.
Yeah, and it never hurts to ask for sure. Yep.
Another question we have is, the application process for undergraduate and graduate programs different? How are they different between undergraduate and graduate?
Yeah, I think undergraduate is much more streamlined in that you apply often to one office for this school. A lot of times for graduate programs, you're applying to the specific program. So you're working with graduate admissions in psychology or graduate admissions in politics. And the requirements can vary in terms of GRE scores or GPA, letters of recommendation. So graduate programs are much less streamlined in terms of their requirements. So that's why it's really important, especially for graduate programs, to research as much as you can on not even each specific school, but also each specific program.
Mm-hmm. And some universities have a common application for undergraduate programs. Yeah. The common application is something you can find out more online or through your EducationUSA Center. Mm-hmm. Does Catholic University accept the common application?
Yep, absolutely. So we do accept the common application. We also have our own application on the website, and we do not prefer one over the other. So it's always up to the student as to which one is easier for them.
Mm-hmm. Through the common application, you can fill out one application and send that same one to multiple universities.
Absolutely, yep.
Another question is, what are the most common mistakes applicants make? Terrific question.
Yeah. Number one, I mean, it's waiting till the last minute. I think when you don't do things early, you're rushed, and that's when you make mistakes, whether that's errors in your essay or forgetting to send in certain credentials. I think making a checklist, a to-do list is always really, really helpful. And I think that sometimes applicants are afraid to send in more information, but at Catholic University, the more information is always better for us because we're really trying to get an assessment of who you are as a whole person. So don't ever be afraid to send in more information, and especially don't be afraid to contact the college or university or the admissions office. Mm-hmm. I think especially today and moving forward, universities and colleges are welcoming that sort of contact, and especially at Catholic, we would much rather you call us, email us with questions before the fact than after the fact, for sure.
Great advice. Another question is, can I make up for a poor grade point average with other elements of my application? For instance, if one element is not so good, will others balance it out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when a school like a liberal arts school does a whole person assessment, that's one of the advantages of doing that kind of review. If your overall GPA is poor, but for example, you've done better each year, that's something that's really good to see and something that we look at as well. Your extracurricular activities, your standardized test scores, your letters of recommendation as well. So again, we understand that everyone has their own unique situation and goes through their own challenges. So certainly that's why we ask for all the other parts. So your things like your essays and your test scores to help get the whole picture.
That's great to know. Thank you. Let's go to New Delhi for more questions.
Yeah, hi, I'm applying for doctoral studies in English literature, and I want to know how important is it for students to communicate with professors in US universities prior to applying for doctoral or PhD programs, and what should such a communication entail?
Okay, great question. This person is applying for English literature, a program of English literature, and wants to know how appropriate communication is and what kind of communication is appropriate between the university and the department prior to submitting the application.
That is a great question, and I think while it varies from school to school, my experience with graduate programs is that it's important to be in contact with the professor that you're hoping to work with. A lot of times they accept only a few students each year to come into those doctoral programs to specifically work with them. So it's important that they know you throughout the application process and know who you are and get an idea of how well the two of you would work together. So I would say especially for doctoral programs that's important, and I would encourage it at Catholic for sure.
Thank you. Great advice. Okay, do we have another question?
Hi, I want to ask that are TOEFL score reports necessary to get admission into the United States universities? And except that TOEFL, any other tests are acceptable, and if so, which ones?
Okay, if I'm understanding the question, you want to know what tests you need to take for doctoral programs in the United States?
No. I want to ask that are the TOEFL score reports required to get admission into the US universities, or are other tests acceptable rather than TOEFL? And if so, which one are the tests?
Okay, so the question is, do you need to take the TOEFL test to get admission to a U.S. university, or are there other tests you can take besides the TOEFL test to get accepted?
Yeah. A lot of times I think some universities have test optional policies, but for the most part, as an international student, they do require some sort of standardized test. At Catholic, we accept a few different tests, so you can take the TOEFL, the IELTS, the SAT, or the ACT. You don't have to take all of them. You can take one of them to demonstrate English proficiency. So those are really the 4 big tests that you can take. There's always new English tests that are coming out from different companies, but I would always check with the school to make sure they accept those English tests. But the TOEFL and the IELTS are usually the safest bet for taking English proficiency exams.
Yeah, and as always, it's important to check the university website. And as Michael mentioned previously, if you're enrolled in an intensive English program, that could be substituted in lieu of a test at some universities. So you want to also think of that. Thanks for the great questions, New Delhi. We will come back to you in a bit, but let's first get to a few more questions from our online audience. We have a question on what types of questions might be asked during the interview, and what are the tips I need to take in order to have an upper hand at it. I'm assuming this is the visa interview, or are there other interviews that you would?
Sure. So a lot of colleges, universities, and Catholic offer admissions interviews. So you can, whether that's on campus or over the phone, oftentimes you can do them over Skype now as well. So the point of those is to get to know you outside of your application. So we've already seen your transcript and your test scores, and so we'll ask you certain questions like, what are you involved with? What do you want to continue to be involved with when you come to a college campus? How do you see yourself contributing to our campus community? What are your favorite classes? I always like to ask how your teachers would describe you and how your friends would describe you. So really get to know you on more of a personal level for the admissions interviews. In terms of a visa interview, I think it's going to be pretty standard questions in terms of your plans to study and your plans ultimately after you're done studying as well.
Thanks. Great answer. Another question is credit given for work experience?
Yeah. So that's a very institution-specific question, and often a very program-specific question. At Catholic, I know for the most part it is not. It depends on the degree program that you're applying to. So I think that's a question that is really geared towards academic programs within each school as well.
And what are different types of scholarships and fellowships?
So scholarships can really range from a wide variety of factors. At Catholic, our scholarships are based on your academic performance, so like your GPA and your test scores. We have a scholarship that's for community service as well. So a lot of times colleges and universities will have scholarships designated for certain students and certain attributes. So I think it's always really important as well to inquire and make sure you know if you need to apply separately to those scholarships. Sometimes the school will automatically consider it for you for them, and sometimes it's an additional application or an additional essay that you have to write. In terms of fellowships, that's something that's offered more in the graduate side. So if you're doing a PhD program or something like that, you often might receive a fellowship or an assistantship that will help you pay towards the tuition for your program as well.
So the scholarships and fellowships are available through universities, and also you should check your EducationUSA Center for any scholarships and fellowships that might be listed more generally as well.
Absolutely.
Another question is, what should I do if I can't visit a campus in the United States?
I think that's a great place for the interview to come into play, and really contacting the college and university via email. For us at Catholic, it's really great and really important to know if you can't visit but you wish you could, we'll do a Skype interview with you. sometimes, and a lot of times there's virtual college fairs as well through lots of different venues. So colleges will have sort of something similar to this, where they'll have a virtual booth and representatives that are able to answer questions. So I think that it's really important to be in contact with the university if you're not able to visit campus, especially for schools that are looking to kind of gauge a student's interest as well.
Thanks, that's great advice. Another question is a resume useful for the admissions director?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's really useful. The Common App gives you a chance to kind of put things into that, but a lot of times a resume will allow you to kind of critique it and edit it however you want. For graduate programs, it's a great way to show your work experience and kind of give your duties in more detail. But again, it's that piece that kind of gives you outside of the classroom what you're involved with. So I think it's a great supplemental piece.
Wonderful. We've had several viewers ask, what is the admissions process to transfer from a foreign university to a U.S. university?
I know at Catholic it is pretty similar actually to applying directly from high school, with the additional factor that we'll need your college transcripts, and we'll need them to be evaluated for U.S. equivalency. But in addition to that, things like English proficiency are virtually the same. So I think that the processes are extremely similar, with just a few extra pieces of the application that you would have to send in.
Okay, great advice, thank you. Another question that's come in, should I send photocopies of certificates and awards?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's not on your resume, even if it is, if it's a cool looking certificate or something like that, it's always really great to look at. And it's really cool to see the organizations that you're a part of and the awards you've received, because again, that gives us a really good window into how you would contribute to the campus community once you're with us here in the U.S.
We have another question. How many credit hours can I transfer from one institution to another?
Sure. That's a great question. At Catholic, you can transfer a maximum of 60. So half of your degree you have to complete on campus at the university. 60 is a pretty good general rule that I've seen in lots of colleges and universities. Lots of times they want you to kind of do around 2 years at their own institution. But again, that varies from school to school. And that's always usually very clearly indicated on their transfer website.
Thank you. We have another question. Who should I contact if I have questions about charges to my credit card?
Sure.
Great.
Yes. So it depends on the charges. If it's in regard to an application fee, absolutely contact the college or university. If you're applying through the Common App, they actually have their own customer support that will help you with that. If it's just sort of a general charge while you're studying here in the U.S., credit card companies have great customer service lines for that. So they absolutely just call them right away and let them know the problem, and they'll walk you through it.
So if you see charges on your credit card from a university, you should contact the university if you need any explanation about what's been charged.
The typical charges are, again, like the application fee and then your deposit. So those are the two charges that you would see from Catholic, and I couldn't imagine there would be many more from other universities.
Yes, good. It's always good to monitor those things. How do I know my application was submitted successfully?
Yep.
Great question.
Oftentimes you'll get an email saying thank you for your application and providing you some sort of login information. So most schools today have an online portal where you can log in, and it'll give you an actual checklist of what you're missing. And a lot of times you'll get that right away. So you're able to log in and check. You can always call the university or email them. Even if they can't look it up right away, they'll be able to kind of walk you through and let you know how to log in and check that status. So it's always good to get that confirmation email that you submitted it, but always monitor to make sure that they're receiving your documents too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Another question, what in my application makes me competitive for getting a scholarship?
Yeah. I think that depends on which scholarship you're applying to. So if it's an academic scholarship, it's going to be your GPA. I mentioned that Catholic has one for students who do community service, so a service resume is going to be very helpful for that as well. If it's a specific scholarship that you need to apply separately for, let the university know how interested you are in that scholarship and make sure that you're filling out that extra application.
Good advice. We have another question about FAFSA. That's a financial aid form. And is FAFSA for international students, or is it only for U.S. students?
Yeah, I believe FAFSA was only for U.S. citizens. Financial aid for international students often will come in the form of scholarships, fellowships, assistantships. Some services will have sort of universities will have their own form that international students can fill out to give them an idea of their financial situation. But I think the FAFSA is really geared towards U.S. citizens for financial aid.
Thank you. We have another question. Does the application, does the application process differ between a community college and a four-year university?
I think it does. Oftentimes it does. Community colleges might have more of a streamlined application process, and they might ask you for different credentials, but you're still applying to an institution of higher education, so your transcripts and essay and things like that are still going to be very important.
Okay, we're going to go to New Delhi for some more questions.
Hi, my question is, what are the difference between applying for the fall and spring intake? Is one intake better than the other?
Okay, the question is, if a university or college has two application dates, fall or spring, is there a better one? Is it better to apply in the fall or better to apply in the spring, or does it matter?
So that depends on your preference. My advice that I always give to students is, if you can, especially if you're coming from high school to an undergraduate program, apply for fall. You're able to kind of start the year with the entire incoming freshman class. Oftentimes spring incoming classes are smaller. And then that also gives you the summer months to prepare and get everything ready. Sometimes coming in for the spring is a bit more of a time crunch. I think that deadlines for the spring are often in early fall. We certainly have students and international students who come and begin studies at Catholic University in the spring as well. So it's definitely something that's done and done often. But it's really up to your preference, and it's whatever you feel most comfortable with. Whatever you feel is going to give you the most time to get prepared, and it's going to give you the best college experience that you can. So.
Yeah. It's good to have that option, and we know that academic years are different around the world. So,
and sometimes certain programs will only accept students in the fall. So while a university as a whole might accept spring applicants and admit students for the spring, some programs, specific programs, might not. So that's also really important to know as well.
Okay, great. Thanks. Do we have another question from New Delhi?
Hi, I'm a prospective applicant for fall 2015, and I wish to know that if we could add or edit any documents after we have submitted our application.
Okay, that's a great question.
Like documents such as updated transcripts.
Absolutely. The question is, after someone submits their application for admission to a U.S. college or university, can they edit it after it's been submitted?
For the most part, no. So after you submit something like the Common App or the application, that's going to be your application to the university. So that's why it's really important to start early, proofread, and look over things before you send them, because it's really important to make sure you're putting your best product out there when you send it in.
Is it possible to submit supplemental materials after the deadline?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So if you do make a mistake and you want to send in a supplemental letter or an email explaining it, I would recommend doing that as well, or an extra letter or something like that is always helpful.
Yes. So again, communications with the International Student Service office at the university you want to apply to is really important. If you've submitted your application, but yet there's something else you feel the university should know, you can just email them.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, unfortunately, our time is ending, and we want to thank everyone who participated in this chat and posed such great questions about the application process. And a special thanks to Michael Nixon, who has served as a very valuable resource. You can continue the discussion on Twitter using the hashtag StudyInTheUSA, and also please remember to visit educationusa.state.gov for more general information. And come back for our next program on February 24, in which we'll talk about the wide variety of colleges in the United States and the different geographical locations in the United States. We hope your application is successful and that you will be continuing your education at one of our wonderful institutions here in the U.S. very soon. Goodbye for now.